Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 6 of the Douglas Social Credit podcast. My name's William Waite, and I'm here with Professor Oliver Haydorn. And this week we would like to um, comment on, we've created a number of memes or quote boards of quotes from Clifford Hugh Douglas, who was the thinker behind social credit. And we've created about 150 of these, and the intent is to spread them far and wide on the internet. And we thought today we would just select some of these quotes and talk about them and hopefully pique your interest in them and get you sharing them as well. So, Oliver, if you would
Yes,
like to start with one of your selections.
sure. I should just mention briefly that there are five categories. So, me being me, it's done in a very systematic fashion. And we've got some quotes that are in the philosophy series, those are the purple ones. Then we've got the economics series, that's the yellow series. There's a set of memes dealing with Douglas's political thought, that's the orange series. And then we've got his some of his historical themed quotes that we've used to create a series of memes, and that's the green series. And finally, we have the fifth category, which is sort of a catch-all, a miscellaneous series, which at the
Mm.
moment is mostly composed of Douglas's thoughts on religion, Christianity, and the relationship between social credit and Christianity. So what I'm going to do here, um, I'm going to try and pull up and I've chosen these not exactly at random because Douglas is so brilliant. He's such a genius that
Mm.
any of the memes that we created we could be sharing now. So I don't know if this is my favorite as such, but I thought it was a good one to share. All right, so how is that? You can see that, William?
Yep, I can see
All
that.
right. So this is a quote from an article entitled The Tragedy of Human Effort from 1936. And it's in the philosophy series, the Purple Philosophy series. And he says the general principles which govern association for the common good are as capable of exact statement as the principles of bridge building, and departure from them is just as disastrous. Right? So we're dealing here with the the principles, the laws of being, of reality that we need to discern and obey and apply through appropriate mechanisms if we want anything to flourish. And society or association is no exception to this general rule. If we want to live in stable, healthy, happy, successful societies, well, there are rules, if you will, that have to be discovered and Douglas did that. In his social philosophy, he talks about what the components are of that make for a happy society, and lays out what the correct principles are, so that we can then measure our societies against those principles and see how well we are faring. So at the bottom, we've got our websites, thepeoplescredit.com and socred.org. A little bit there about C.H. Douglas when he lived, born in 1879, died 1952. And the little code at the side is Social Credit Philosophy 21. So this is the 21st meme in the Social Credit Philosophy Purple series. And I
Mm.
insisted on that just so that we can keep track of how many memes we've got and which meme is which. Yeah, so I think at this stage we've got 40 in this philosophy series. So uh, yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add in reference to this particular meme. Any thoughts you had to share?
When you read Douglas, Douglas was an engineer by profession. So
Yes.
you quite often see this comparison with engineering or in his work. And there's also, I think, some people are a bit bewildered as to why things in the modern world seem to be going so disastrously wrong.
Hmm.
And I think that one of the reasons for that is at base that they don't really believe that there is this necessity for obedience to the natural law or to these fundamental principles that Douglas is alluding to here. I think we
Yes.
see, in our modern organization that people feel like they can make things whatever they want them to be,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that there is no, Douglas talked about what he called the canon of rightness, which is this well, how would you describe that? It's this law that runs through everything,
Right.
and departure from this canon of rightness, from these principles, can go one place, and that is to chaos and catastrophe. And I think that's
That's correct.
what we're seeing almost everywhere now.
Yes. So Douglas referred to what others have referred to, philosophers, theologians have referred to as the natural law. He called it the canon, right? And it's basically the idea is that if you want to transport people, let's say, from one continent to the other by airplane, you've got to design the airplane in line with the laws of aerodynamics. There are all these laws that have to be understood and correctly applied in order for a plane to do what it does. And you just can't construct the plane in any which way that you think it should be constructed. You actually have to say, well, how does reality demand that it be constructed in order for it to actually work? And that is true not only of airplanes and air travel, but it's true of every single realm or domain of human activity. There, if we want to achieve a certain objective, if we want to be successful, there are certain principles that have to be followed.
Mm.
You see, so and the same is true of, you want to, as I said before, a healthy, stable, sane society, flourishing society. Well, what are the rules? What are the norms? What are the principles, the standards of a successful association? And how can we best apply those so that we do get the sort of society that we would be happy with? I should mention, just as an aside, that based on my own sort of research and reflection, I think this whole notion of the canon and or the natural law stems ultimately from the ideas of the prophet Zoroaster. Zoroaster talked about asha, which is truth in the sense of functional order. That God created the world in such a way that he had a blueprint for how it should work harmoniously, where no one creature or element is prospering at the expense of another, where there's a minimum of friction. And this concept of asha, of functional order, gave the impetus to many similar ideas in Greek philosophy, the logos, the rational order of the universe, and from that into Christianity. So it's really a very, Douglas, probably not even knowing it, had inherited ultimately from Zoroaster this notion of laws, beneficial laws of the universe that we follow so that we can achieve happiness and flourishing and goodness. Or if we disregard them, well, then we suffer the inevitable consequences and we have disorder and dysfunction. So yeah.
And social credit was Douglas's thought, and social credit was particularly concerned with how you establish a proper relationship between the individual and the group.
Correct.
Like how can you get the advantages of group association without that group dominating individual initiative?
That's right. That's right. So what's the proper relationship between the individual and the group? And
Mm,
he's held that the individual, of course, is more important than the group, and the group is there to serve the individual. And so the systems we have in place, the financial, political system, should be designed in such a way that the individual is able to benefit and is not in any way exploited or dominated by the group, or more particularly by a little oligarchy that's taken control of the group. And
mm,
that's Douglas social credit in a nutshell. It is an application of this notion of asha to society, to associations. If we know what is functional order as far as society is concerned, as far as the association is concerned. Yeah.
mm.
So I'll put that one down now, and I'll give you an opportunity to select one of yours.
This one, and this segues nicely from your mention of a small group. Hold on, I didn't do that correctly. Hang on, share. Okay. You've disabled my screen sharing
I have.
somehow.
I don't know how I've done that. Oh dear. Well, tell me which one it is and I'll pull it up.
It's the one. Hang on. It's CSH 13.
CSH 13. Okay.
Remove powers vested in power maniacs.
Okay. So let's see, do square this one.
This is it.
Okay.
So this is published in Program for the Third World War in 1943. So we all know what was going on in 1943, and it seems that Douglas is looking forward to the third instalment of the World War here.
Hmm.
Um, so this was quite late in his career. He says, I believe we should be taking the most generally accurate view of history for at least the past 2,000 years if we view it as a conscious attempt on the one side and an unconscious reaction on the other side to and from the separation of the individual and his natural powers, and to vest them in organizations controlled by power maniacs. So this is obviously Douglas is taking a very broad historical view here.
Hmm.
And he's saying that there's this ebb and flow of history between a conscious, organized oligarch, if you like, who have as their main objective the centralization of power. And
Hmm.
the way to achieve this is to take decision-making power from individuals. And history can be characterized by this the movements of this conscious and organized group on the one hand against the individuals trying to retain decision-making power over their own lives.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, we can see the manifestation of this centralization of power by small groups and organizations in our world now. It is quite obvious. Obviously, it seems to be quite an organized attempt to deprive electorates all over the world, populations all over the world of their decision-making power
Hmm.
um, through organisations such as national governments, the supranational organisations, the UN, WHO. We know of those ones. The monopolistic business community, multinational corporations, etc. And I suppose people don't really see in these terms,
Hmm.
largely because partly because I think we've been discouraged from taking any sort of conspiratorial view of history, perhaps, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
People are encouraged to think of history as kind of a series of unrelated, chaotic
Mm.
episodes.
Hmm.
Okay, and the and this pattern is not recognizable if you view history like that.
Right. Right.
So, is there anything to add
I
to that,
would,
Oliver?
yeah, I would just say that I've often thought that those of I I'll just say this. I don't want to offend anybody, of course, but I've often thought that those of us who have some sense as to what's actually going on are caught in the middle between the unconscious on the one side, who are also being exploited, abused, dominated, but just don't understand it or don't realize it. And then these oligarchies, based ultimately in the plutocracy, the financial plutocracy, on the other side. So it's almost like there's a small group of us who are fighting for the reestablishment of the proper sort of relationship between institutions, government, business, and the individual. And there are a lot of people who just take the world as it is and don't think too deeply about it, or know that something is wrong, but they can't quite put their finger on it, or only have a partial understanding. And then on the other side, you've got, of course, the oligarchs who are benefiting from current arrangements and are wanting even to increase the centralization of power and maximize the unearned increment of association for themselves.
Hmm.
So what we are trying to do, our mission is to try to expand the number of people that see reality from a Douglas social credit point of view, because of all the various thinkers out there, I having studied a lot of them, I think that no one comes as close as Douglas to putting his finger on the pulse of reality.
I think we were talking about this thing. That's partly because he goes where other commentators generally don't, which is an
Mm,
analysis of the financial system and how that system is of central importance in how humans live and work now
right,
in the modern world.
right. The
You
financial
know, like you
system is the
can,
key.
yeah, financial system is the key. I mean, what motivates the people who are doing this is it's not a separate issue, but it's you're talking about the power maniacs.
Mm,
I think that's actually quite a difficult thing for ordinary people to understand because they don't identify with this will to power.
it would never
It's
occur to
not,
them. Yeah,
I mean, they do want some limited power over their own lives, of course.
yeah,
Um, but the idea of dominating large swathes of people or the world is just not something that really has ever occurred to them as desirable or
right.
proper.
Or possible. I
How
guess.
possible, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right. I'll pull up another one here of mine. If I can get it there. So here we go. So this one is the first meme in the social credit economics series, and it's taken from a speech that Douglas gave. I think it was before a law society in 1936 again, Money and Historical Survey. It's an excellent, excellent article, and I highly recommend that if people are interested in learning more about Douglas social credit and really going deeply into it, that would be an excellent starting point. I'll try to remember to put it in the show notes. So he says in that article, which was the transcript of a speech he gave, I find it incredible that a stable society can persist founded on the most colossal lucrative fraud that has ever been perpetrated on society. And of course, he's talking about the banking system, right? It's a fraud insofar as the money that they lend, they create out of nothing. But as far as I know, as far as I've experienced, as far as anybody knows or experiences, they're not really upfront about the fact that the money that they lend you is simply digital entries that they create through bookkeeping procedures, right? A lot of people, even today, are under the illusion or have the delusion that the banks in lending money, let's say to buy a house or a car or whatever it is, or to finance a business, are lending the money that others have deposited with them, right? People have gone to work, they've been paid, they deposit their money in the bank, and then the bank takes that money and lends it to others, right? The bank is merely connecting lenders with savers. And that, of course, is absolute hogwash. Nothing of the sort goes on. Every new loan is the creation of bank credit ex nihilo, but they're not upfront about this. So there's a even now there's a fraudulent dimension to it, and it's extremely profitable, right? The official profit and loss accounts that you would see that banks would put out is maybe 20% profit margins, and that's, you can ask or question how accurate that is, because there are various ways in which their real profits can be hidden. But when you look at a grocery store, I don't know what it is in Australia, but certainly in Canada, a grocery store might have very small profit margin, 1%, 0.5%, 1.5%, 2%. Banking kind of stands out because it is one of the most highly profitable businesses out there regarding their profit margins. And we also one of the most extensive businesses because we all rely on it. We're all doing business with the banks, right? If you need money, you go to the bank. If you have money that you want to keep safe, you go to the bank. So everyone is kind of forced to do business with the banking system. And they make billions and billions and billions of dollars in profit every year. Yeah. So maybe, I don't know if you've got a few ideas.
That profit is, underwritten by the real wealth that is the property of the community.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, Douglas said that all the real fraud, the essence of the fraud is that the money they lend, they claim as theirs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're lending it against the real wealth of the community, and that's the real substance behind what they're doing.
Yes. Yes. So that's even a deeper dimension to the fraud.
Hmm.
Yeah.
The other thing is, it's enormously profitable in money terms, but it's not profitable in influence, in terms of influence,
mm-hmm.
which is not quite so easy to quantify.
Mm-hmm.
They can essentially choose the businesses and organizations which get favorable terms and therefore have market advantage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like a small farm, you're looking at 10% interest on that sort of loan, and that cost to the business, and it increases vastly the risk
mm-hmm.
of that kind of business.
Mm.
Whereas if you're a they tend to favor very big organizations,
mm-hmm.
bankers, and that's why we tend to think, well, one of the reasons at least, the proliferation of organizations of massive scale against small businesses, for instance, small decentralized businesses. So they get to kind of set the conditions of the market in a way, in a very
mm-hmm.
real way.
Mm-hmm.
They by the terms they put on their insist on with their lending.
Yes. Yes. Hilaire Belloc makes this point that the system, insofar as it is a capitalist system, the capitalism in the system basically predisposes or favors larger organizations and the centralization of economic production into the hands of these multinationals, transnationals, monopolies, oligopolies, etc. And a large, I mean, there are many reasons for that, but a large driver behind that is, of course, the financial system, the banking system, that the banking system itself, as you're describing, favors that sort of concentration of power. And that is not in the interest of the common individual. And that's the key point that we need to underline, is that, that might suit certain individuals very nicely, because the power and the wealth and the privilege are being centralized in their hands. But it is not in the interest of the common individual. And if we assume that in order to have a healthy, happy, successful society, the common individual needs to be properly satisfied with economic, financial, political conditions, this is not a recipe for a stable, healthy society. We need to decentralize and distribute power, privilege, and wealth.
No, no, good.
Yeah.
The second one that I chose
Mhm.
was SCP-7, need for dehypnotization.
Okay. SCP-7. Let me see if I can bring it up here. SPC. There we go. And I will share it. Okay, you got it there? Or is that?
So this is from a series that Douglas wrote, which came to be known as Whose Service is Perfect Freedom. And I see that it was published posthumously,
I believe that,
1955.
yes. So I believe that a lot of the components of that book had been published while Douglas was alive in The Social Creditor in serial form. And then after he died, his followers, I think Tudor Jones in particular, decided to collect all of those things and publish it posthumously as a book, which then became Whose Service is Perfect Freedom, which is a reference to the Common Book of Prayer, I believe.
And I like this one because it perhaps charts a little bit Douglas's own development um, on his thinking on these things. You know, he says that it has become clear to me that the difficulties which confront the world's miserable struggles towards sanity are not in the main intellectual difficulties. They are almost wholly problems of dehypnotization. So, as social creditors, we tend to think that these problems that we're on about all the time can be demonstrated, can be revealed to people. We can say, the power that the banks have is illegitimate and we no longer need full employment, and all these perfectly reasonable points. And we can make these arguments, but they seem to lack traction with ordinary people.
Hmm.
And we've spoken about this a lot. It's almost like, we're speaking to people who are asleep. And this is what Douglas is alluding to here. He's decided that it's not, the best way in is not to perhaps, I mean, you need the intellectual arguments and so forth, but it's almost like the population need to snap out of whatever hypnotized state that they're in so that they can
Mm-hmm.
see that most of the difficulties which confront us are actually right before us.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can get hold of the problems, we can work through with the solutions.
Yes.
I mean, you and I have spoke a lot about this. How can we get people to see what we're on about, especially with respect to the financial system, which is which we can explain how that works and why it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Um, but again, we seem to come up against this kind of, you know, hypnotization. I would add one more thing. It was sort of during the Great Depression that social credit became a real force in the world, and perhaps it was the extreme privation that
Mm-hmm.
came out of that situation that caused people to become somewhat dehypnotized and see, oh, okay, how can a world go from being, relatively wealthy and healthy, and suddenly there's poverty everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And they could
Mm-hmm.
see that it was actually the financial system which was the central problem which caused the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's hard times that wake people up, is what I'm saying.
Yes, unfortunately, people seem to not pay attention if they think that everything's going well until there's some major crisis, whether natural or artificially induced. And then all of a sudden, oh, okay, what's going on here? And then they might start to dig deeper and ask some basic questions. But people have all sorts of ideas about, let's say, full employment or the necessity of full employment, which, you think if any person just took a few moments just to think about it, they'd see it doesn't make any sense as a policy.
Mm.
Clearly, if you go into any warehouse or department store or supermarket, clearly you can see we're awash in production,
Mm.
and how many people already have jobs that are quite questionable in terms of the contribution they make to the real flow of goods and services. So and we have all these wonderful machines. We have AI, we have automation. Why on earth are we insisting on a policy of full employment? It's clearly not physically necessary. It's only perhaps psychologically necessary because people have this erroneous idea that we all have to work very, very hard or the sky is going to fall.
Yeah. Well, we've been indoctrinated with that in mind, haven't we?
Yeah.
It's I read a quote the other day. It's this involvement in production is kind of the alpha and omega of our modernity.
Mm.
That we've got to be involved somehow in the creation of physical things, or you know, it's
Yeah.
just a it's just a fallacy.
Well, and that's just one example, right? So there are many, maybe we should create a list actually and just focus on all these false ideas that people have, which prevent them from understanding and appreciating the Douglas vision for society. That might be one way of sort of undermining all of these psychological barriers, uh, because it's really Douglas. The gist of Douglas is really not that hard to understand.
The implications are, just extraordinarily, you're talking about a completely different world,
Yes.
and maybe that's why some people have trouble with it. I mean, what do people do? Some might ask, if they're
Yeah.
not if they're not bound by this work routine.
Right.
What are they
Right.
supposed to do?
Right. So it would require a change in the educational systems. People would have to be educated for leisure rather than for work.
Mm.
Education would cease to be job preparation, and also the general culture would have to change. But we should point out to those people that there have been times and places in human history where we didn't have people working 9 to 5, 5 days a week, etc., where people had a large degree of leisure. So they say that in Merry England, 1493, the average peasant only had to work 15 weeks of the year and enjoyed 150 official holidays every year. So there have been times and places when people have enjoyed prosperity and at the same time leisure. And the sky did not fall. In
Mm.
fact, those often were times of great cultural development, the Renaissance, and so forth. And we can reasonably expect, if we can dehypnotize people and reorder their thinking, we can rightfully expect that once we release the financial pressure, make money a servant rather than our master, and put the common individual in the place of where the oligarchy presently is, we can have a whole new civilization, a whole new culture. And Robert Heinlein, the science fiction writer, he understood this, and he wrote a whole book on what a Douglas Social Credit Society might look like, called "For Us, the Living." It's a good read, not so much because of the story itself, but because he's exploring, using the story as a means to explore how society could be re-engineered and reformatted so that it would give far more satisfactory results to the common individual. And that book actually was published posthumously as well. Yeah. So we're coming to the end of our time. We've got our websites again are thepeoplescredit.com.au and socred.org. And please like and subscribe. Please share the videos. and we will
Share the memes.
share the memes. Above all, share the memes. We're going to make them available. We'll make them available on the peoplescredit.com.au, and I'll see if I can make them available on socred.org as well. And so any person can go there, copy it, and share it online, especially social media. And we will attempt to use this to get the word out, to expand the number of people in the world who actually know of and have an understanding and appreciation for Douglas Social Credit, because it is the answer. Name your issue, whatever you're concerned about. Douglas Social Credit is the answer, or a good part of the answer. So, we just need to get on with it. Yeah.
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and we will see you hopefully next week for episode 7.
See you later.
Bye-bye.
See you next time. Bye.